Back before AMG became the performance arm of Mercedes-Benz, they were this independent company who tuned a lot of cars. Well, most of the time, let's say 90% of the time, they still did Mercedes-Benz cars. However, there were a couple of exceptions, and as long as you had the money, they would easily tune your car for you. And this one right here is an example of that. Here we have the 1990 Mitsubishi Galant AMG. Today I'm going to show you around this car and I'm also going to give it a test drive, so stay tuned. Now, there were actually two Mitsubishis tuned by AMG. One was the Debonair, which was a little bit ricery, so they didn't really play with the engine, they just gave it kits. But the Galant actually received the engine tune, more on that later, as well as the body kits. So up front over here, you do get these blacked out grills with the tuned by AMG badge. You get more AMG badge by the bumper. Then you also get really big fog lights down below. You get amber turn signals on this one. And the side of the car gets the entire body cladding treatment. You also get a really discreet AMG badge here over at the front. Then you get blacked out monoblock AMG rims in 15 inches. What I love about the Galant is that you have this quarter panel over here, which really does add in a little bit more light towards the cabin. Then what makes this really special is this wrap around spoiler. So it's a bit thin on the sides, but does get thicker and more aggressive towards the back. Plus you also get a third brake light. Now, one thing common with a lot of JDM cars, and especially hatchbacks, is you do get a rear wiper, which this one also gets. And then you get your typical badges over here. So your old Mitsubishi badge, it's still pretty small. Galant badge, more of that AMG design right here with an AMG badge towards the side because this is a revised bumper. Then you also get dual exhaust on this one. So here's where the real magic starts. So AMG took the regular naturally aspirated 2-liter 4G63 engine from the Galant and tuned it from around 140 horsepower all the way to 170 horsepower. And this one right here also makes 191 Newton meters of torque, coupled with a 5-speed manual. What's cool about this is that it screams and it goes all the way up to 8,000 RPM. Much more cool things on this one, of course, would be the badging on it, which does say tuned by AMG, together with your regular Mitsubishi badge up top. You're inside. First, to check the door stud. Actually sounds pretty good. So although AMG did not really give the door any treatment aside from the cladding, it does sound like it did receive some German treatment. Inside this car, they only made the Galant AMG in right-hand drive form, so JDM only. But since here in the Philippines, we're not really allowed to drive right-hand drive cars, the owner had to find a workaround. So he took a regular Galant GTi and transplanted all the parts of the original Galant AMG into this. So this one is around 95% accurate catalog spec, and it is pretty cool. However, there are still some weird things about this. So first off, your speedometer and tachometer, it's flipped because the original right-hand drive form is, well, your speedometer is on the left and your tachometer is on the right. However, for the left-hand drive Galant, it's flipped. So yeah, this one is flipped right here. And then another weird thing about this is that the seats, it's power for my passenger side, but not for me, because in the original car, it's the driver who got the power seats. Pretty cool. Anyway, in here, what received the AMG treatment? So first off, your steering wheel, it's different from your regular Galant. It is leather wrapped. You get that AMG badging on it. And your seats too, they're this like velour type of material. It's also like two-tone. And then you also get this AMG stitching or this recess by your headrest. Pretty nice. More AMG treatments include the wooden accents. So your shift knob, it is made out of wood. And you also get these wooden accents towards the side. Aside from that, it's pretty much just your regular Galant. So 90s style air vents, 90s style buttons, even your radio on this one, it's all original. It's also very 90s. You get your radio separate from your cassette deck. You also get a clock on this one, digital clock. And one last thing is your sunroof. So not a lot of these Galant got the sunroof, but for this car, you have that, and that is pretty nice. Now here towards the back, we check the door stud. Also sounds pretty good, surprisingly. Okay, one thing you need to know is that although the Galant nowadays, at least this body Galant, looks a little bit small on the outside and quite comparable to today's subcompact cars, back in the 90s, this car was actually known to be a very large car. This was a mid-sized car for all classifications. And over here, you can really feel how it is a mid-size car. So my legroom is really pretty good with this one. I'm seated behind my driving position. I am only 5'6" though, but even my headroom is also really good. What's kind of odd with these older Japanese cars is that your rear headrests, they are really built into the seat, so it's not adjustable. I do get an armrest over here with more AMG stitching over there. Then I also have this pass-through that it doesn't really go to the trunk. Instead, inside the trunk is this leather compartment, this secret compartment, which I can store stuff through this one. Now, do I have any other toys back here? Well, not really. I do get my power windows, which is pretty cool for this time. I get my own map pockets, and then my quarter panel. It does add in a lot more light in here. Makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And can you see 3 people in here? Yes, you can easily do so because the seats, they do sink in pretty low. So my headroom is still pretty good. And the car, yeah, for modern standards, maybe it's not the widest, but for its time, it's definitely a rather wide car. One cool thing about this car is that over here at the back, you're gonna see this apparatus. No idea what this is at first, but apparently it's an air purifier, which you can control through the front. It's an automatic thing, so you can only control it low and high and has no way to turn it off. Driving the 1990 Mitsubishi Galant AMG. This thing feels like nothing I have ever driven before. First off, the clutch feel in this one, it's one of the lowest biting points, so you just lift your foot slightly off the clutch and it tends to bite already. So if you're at a standstill in your first gear, you have to be very careful because it's quite easy to stall this car if you're coming from, well, pretty much any other manual cars out there. Now, the gear shifts in this one too, they're not really crisp, they're just yes, they are buttery smooth in that way, but you're not exactly sure if you're putting it in the right gear. There's not much feedback when it comes to the gear throws. When it comes to power, this one originally had like 140 horsepower, right? And now upgrading this to 170 horsepower may still not seem like much, especially for modern standards, but you have to remember that although this was classified as a mid-size car, in today's standards, size-wise, this thing is only around our subcompact cars. So this one with its 170 horsepower, it's not the fastest car out there, but it does bring in a sense of driving joy when you do drive it, especially since you do have that really nice sounding exhaust at the back. Now the steering in this one too, it's sufficiently weighted. It's not exactly precise, but it's like the perfect blend of something that you would have fun with still in the city, and even if you're going at faster speeds. Yeah, it does give you some sense of driver involvement in this one. Now this one right here revs all the way up to 8,000 RPM, but since it's a bit on the older side and this has just been pretty much built and restored, I really don't want to push it. So I've only been revving it up to 4,000 RPM, and I can still feel like there is still a lot of power on tap should I want to squeeze it out. So yes, that 170 horsepower can't be harnessed yet right now in my current driving conditions, but if you do take this out to the open road, I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with this car. You can get the Galant AMG with optional adaptive dampers, and unfortunately this car doesn't have it, but that is fine because there is still sufficient amount of handling in it. There is still some sort of body roll, very similar to what you would get with an E-Class. However, the trade-off for that is that your comfort is also actually quite similar to an older E-Class. It's not really jerky or jarring in here. The ride is really not choppy in any way. It's just a smooth riding experience, plus the fact that your seats on this one, they're still the older type, all soft, not that ergonomic in that regard, but it's comfortable. If you're gonna go longer journeys in this one, yes, it might not be the best seats, but for your in-town city speeds, your in-town trips, these seats are actually pretty good. And also the fact that they're not leather means that you will not bake in the sun. Another thing I really love about the Galant AMG is that the brakes, I'm not exactly sure if they tuned it. However, they do feel like Euro cars. So in a lot of Japanese cars, the brakes tend to be very juddery. Like the very moment you step on it, it just jerks you forward. But this one has the typical Mercedes-Benz or pretty much any other Euro car's brake feel, where it's just a constant, smooth and linear braking feel. We're here to turn. Yeah, it's all right. It's not that tight again. It revs really loudly. Even at 4,000 RPM, this car already screams. There's really not that much noise insulation involved in this one. In that regard, though, it does feel like a Japanese car. It feels like you're driving one of those older Civics or those older Lancers. And I haven't driven the regular Galant GTi, but if it felt like this, then it really does feel like a very light and nimble car. Another advantage is that despite having all that aggressive AMG body kits and all that styling, this car is actually not too low. It's still, well, typical AMG fashion, wherein you can drive it fast, yes, but you can also comfortably enjoy it on your everyday drive. So even here in Manila, if you do decide to, okay, you can't really pick up one of these anymore, but if you decide to kind of build one, it's something you can still drive on your daily drives. It's not gonna scrape, and it's not gonna give you a heart attack at every single intersection or corner or even parking ramp. Now the question might be, does it feel like an AMG? Can a Mitsubishi actually feel like an AMG? Well, yes and no. AMG in the sense that it does not feel like the standard car. It feels like a factory tuned car. Yes, it definitely feels like that. This thing, although it's tuned and all that, it still does feel very much stock. However, is it an AMG in the German car sense? Maybe not exactly. You still kind of know that it is a Japanese car. It still has that really light feeling to it. However, does it feel solid? Yeah, I would say so. Especially for a Japanese car, it really does feel solid than most Japanese cars. Now, if you're looking for one of these Galant AMGs, well then, too bad, because number one, they've only built around 500 of these cars, and number two, they've all been made in right-hand drive. This one included, it has just been completely built up, pretty much from scratch, transplanted, so it's almost impossible to find one, especially if you're here in the Philippines where we're not allowed to drive right-hand drive cars. But should you wish to build one, I think it's still very much possible. It's just gonna take a lot of work, and your car is going to be one of the most unique cars out there, just like this one. So if you do get the chance to do that, if you've always been eyeing one of those unicorn cars, especially just that extra flex of having a Japanese AMG car, then maybe, just maybe, you should go make yourself a beautiful Mitsubishi Galant AMG.